Welcome to EPG Pathashala. I am Professor K. Srinivas from Pondicherry University. I teach philosophy at that university. I am the course coordinator for Indian religion and philosophy in the subject Indian culture. In this module on Saktism, we are going to focus on the following learning objectives: Saktism as a religion, religious practices of Saktism, the nature of the Divine Mother Kali. Saktism or Shakta cult is one of the subsects of Hinduism, and it is widely practiced by the Hindus all over India, and they worship goddess Shakti in various forms in different parts of the country. As a religion, Saktism gives importance to the energy or potency, Shakti, of the Godhead than the transcendent Godhead. That means for them, it is the Shakti or potency that is more important. Saktism has many forms in the sense that the various forms that energy has taken. For example, the Shakti or potency manifests in ever so many ways. Saktism is largely associated with Shaivism, for Shakti is the potency of Lord Shiva. Saktism views that the world is the transformation, parinama of the energy of Shiva. The emotional disturbance of Shakti or power or potency leads to the creation of this world. Shiva is consciousness, so also Shakti which belongs to him is also consciousness. Here is the picture of the Shakti, and Shakti being the energy, and Shakti being the part and parcel of Lord Shiva. In one way, Shiva and Shakti are inseparable from each other. Now coming to the forms of Shakti, the Shakti is also popularly known as Kali. In this image of Shakti as Kali, one finds terrifying and hideous dimensions of reality. She is Mata, the loving mother. The worshippers of Shakti worship Shakti as their mother or mother goddess. Then we have Lakshmi, the source of wealth and happiness. And in most of the Hindu families, they have the portraits of the Mother Shakti, Goddess Lakshmi, and also the portrait of Durga, who is symbolized as the destroyer of evil. This is another form of Shakti. Then we have Saraswati, the power of knowledge. The popular Hindu belief is that Shakti manifests in many forms as Lakshmi, as Durga, as Saraswati, and in all these forms, Shakti provides with the worshippers what they really want. Then coming to Shri, the embodiment of beauty, and we have Parvati, another form of Shakti, who is the embodiment of the peace of virtue and love. Often we see Parvati as the consort of Lord Shiva. She is the personification of death and destruction. Now, in this picture, we can visualize the various forms of Shakti. There may be many such forms of Shakti, but some of them are visualized in this picture. Now coming to Kali as the destroyer of death and fear. For example, as humans, we are always haunted by the death and also by fear of death. Kali is often depicted as horrible and gruesome. The reasons for this portrayal of Kali is to help us in realizing the reality of suffering and fear of death and despair faced by every one of us in this empirical world. Also, to encounter Kali in her terrible manifestations is to recognize and witness the instability and the disorder of the world and its ever-present evils. For example, the world in which we live is faced with a lot of evils. Now, this particular picture of Kali makes us realize that we are living in the world of evils. Therefore, her presence in the graveyard reminds us of our own death and loneliness, the pain and suffering of all creatures. It also reminds of the violence and the spitefulness of human beings and the pitiable condition of all created existence. Therefore, the gruesome appearance of Kali reminds us that the world in which we live is a web of suffering and all sorts of evils. Kali, in fact, represents the fearful aspects of existence that help us to confront and conquer our fears of hurt and our fears of disorder and our fears of destruction and our fears of loneliness, finally our fears of death. Because we need to experience all such fearful aspects of human life. None can escape from such kind of fearful aspects. Then the intention of Kali is not to horrify or terrorize us. This is not the reason, but only to remind us of reality and what kind of reality are we really facing and how to confront it realistically, for the reality of life is mixed up with beauty, ugliness, joy, sorrow, and death. This is known to every devotee of Kali. So there are mixed reactions and events every individual faces in his or in her day-to-day life. Now, Kali is also portrayed as a divine mother. As a mother, her devotees worship her in order to get themselves protected from the way in which things really are. But because she reveals to them about their mortality so that they can act fully and freely in order to free themselves from incredible bonding web of presence, practicality, and rationality. And also Kali is the personification of total energy, the positive energy and process of existence. Here is a picture which depicts Kali in her gruesome and horrifying posture. This only symbolizes that the world in which we live is full of evils and all sorts of dangerous things. And we are amidst of such a world. Now coming to Kali as the Divine Mother. Kali, the fearsome destroyer, is the death that destroys death and the fearsome that destroys the fear. In other words, the fearsome portrait of Kali tells us that she is not only the destroyer of death, she is also the destroyer of fear in us. But one can also see in her the Divine Mother. At first, it appears paradoxical that she is seen as the personification of death and destruction, and at the same time, she is also seen as the Divine Mother. But how to explain this paradox? Perhaps the personification of death and destruction indicates that we are in the world of death and destruction. At the same time, Kali is also depicted as the Divine Mother to show that as a positive energy, Kali can overcome death and overcome destruction. So this is how we have to interpret this paradox. Now, the paradox here is that when death and terror are faced and accepted with the spirit of love, then they lose their impact on us. Similarly, if death is the mother that can be embraced through love, then death can be overcome. In loving devotion to Kali, one can overcome time, death, and fear. This is the purpose. Now, function of goddess has inspired Tantra. In Saktism, we come across the role of Tantra. And Saktism and Tantra, they could go together, and they are not two isolated disciplines, strictly speaking. The aim of Tantra is to become aware that all the dimensions and parts of existence are actually the manifestations of energy, the Shakti. The central methodology of Tantrism aims to spiritually transform one's life by conquering those very aspects of life that are destructive and binding. Therefore, the influence of tantric practice is such that the distinction between the sacred and the ordinary, the pure and the polluting vanishes. They become one and the same. Here in this picture, the Kali is shown as the Divine Mother. Her pleasing personality and the way in which she smiles shows that she is affectionate towards her children. And it also indicates that she is ever ready to protect her children who are her devotees from the fear of destruction, from the fear of death, and any such form of evil. Now coming to Kali as the creator. This is another important aspect that we come across in Saktism. Is Kali a creator? For example, Kali in her various manifestations embodies the dynamism of the world in its creative and destructive forms. Even the creation is her creation, even destruction of certain forms of life is also her act. She shares her life with the newly created forms of existence. The other side of creation is the destruction. For example, in order to create something anew, something which is already existing has to be destroyed. So therefore, the process of creation and the process of destruction, they go parallelly. The Divine Mother has two faces, one smiling with grace, as we have seen in the earlier picture, and love, and the other scowling, blacky, fearful, and horrifying. That means the smiling face of Kali indicates creation, and the blacky, fearful, and horrifying face of Kali represents destruction. By accepting her in darkness, her worshippers are able to conquer their fears and come to realize her joyful and loving nature. The Divine Mother symbolizes the loving relationship between the mother and her child. This relationship begins with the sharing of mother's love through which the child prospers. Now, to sum up, Saktism is one of the most important subsects of Hinduism, in which Shakti or the Mother Kali is accepted as the divine principle. And this divine principle is also accepted as the cause of creation and also as the cause of destruction. Because anything that has to be created needs something that is existing in this world has to be destroyed. She embodies both horrible and destructive aspects of reality. This we can say two sides of the same Kali, the Mother Kali. Her worshippers only see kindness and love in her fearful appearance. The Divine Mother reveals that ugliness of hurting and dying so that we can conquer our fear of them to attain the freedom to experience peace and joy. She is only the destroyer of suffering, fear, and death. As indicated before, the Saktism gives so much of importance to Shakti or potency rather than the Godhead or transcendent Godhead. All forms of energy are considered to be Shakti or the manifestations of Shakti. Therefore, the Shakti is treated as potency, and this Shakti is not separated from Shiva. Therefore, in Saktism, we find that there is no separation between Shiva and Shakti. For instance, the world in which we live is the creation of the Shakti. Otherwise, this world would not have come into existence at all. As a creator of this world, the Shakti created various forms of creation. But within these various forms of creation, there are the entities which are good, and there are also entities that are bad. Now, entities which are bad need to be destroyed, and it is the Shakti who destroys such kind of bad elements in order to create something new in that place. In that sense, we use Shakti as a destroyer of some of the unwanted elements. Now, coming to the fear of suffering and fear of death, in Saktism we come across the very reason why Shakti is portrayed as a gruesome or a fearful appearance of Shakti tells us that you can see the fear of death and fear of what you call destruction in her. But by loving Shakti, we embrace that fear of death, and we also embrace that fear of destruction. Therefore, once we embrace the fear of death and fear of destruction, we know that they are not the dangerous things at all. Now we come to know that death is something which is faced by every one of us. Similarly, destruction is something which is faced by every one of us in this world. So the purpose of Kali or Shakti here is to realize that there is a fear of death, there is also a fear of destruction within this empirical world. In order to overcome the fear of death and fear of destruction, we try to embrace the Kali or Shakti as a divine mother, and this divine mother showers her grace on every one of us, through which we try to keep ourselves away from this fear of death and the fear of destruction. For more details on Saktism, I request you to go through the e-text. Thank you.